Absolutely. And that's a perfect segue into, you know, once you have the right components, it is about configuring them to operate the way you need them to again, like to your point, Josh, to ensure that the product you ultimately take to market is the right one. And these are just a few examples of those levers that you should work with your partner to define and ultimately set up. The first of which is the spending controls. And so Josh mentioned closed loop versus open loop. That's definitely an important one to understand and define. You know, where can the funds be spent? How? When? Is it specific, you know, closed loop and limited to a specific merchant or set of merchants or categories of merchants, or is it open loop and can be, you know, used essentially anywhere? The next one to consider is really what rewards and incentives, if any, are tied to the card. So things like cash back at specific merchants or tied into your existing loyalty and rewards programs or points programs. And then taking all of that and determining, does it make sense to have these spending controls at the program level or at the individual card level, or kind of a mix of both, which is all possible. The next piece of this is what we refer to as the flow of funds, which is, you know, the capital requirements and the treasury management aspect of a card program. You know, there's the typical, you know, your card is swiped and, you know, the money gets spent. But there's also flexible things that can be considered based on the requirements of a program, like just-in-time funding, wherein, you know, if the requirements of the program allow for it, you know, limiting your capital outlay or requirements to just enough to cover spending for X number of business days, which allows you to then keep breakage and things like that. So a lot of benefits to be had by really analyzing the treasury management aspect of a card program.
Hey Carter, you mentioned
Yeah.
if your program qualifies for it. Can you give us an example of a program that might qualify for just-in-time funding?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the promotional gift card examples that we talked about just now are great examples of that. So those typically fall into a regulatory framework that allow for just-in-time funding because it's either a closed loop ecosystem specific to certain merchants, or it's promotional in nature and the funds come from your company specifically.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah. And then the end user delivery experience, again, this goes hand in hand with the previous slide, where we, you know, configure the cards themselves to be physical or virtual or a combination of the two, but then take it a step further and start thinking about, you know, how long the cards are active, how, you know, if they require pins, how did the card holders set their pins, what actions and levers are available to either your customer care folks or the card holders themselves to do things like lock the card if they suspect something's going on, or get it shipped to a different address, or replace it if you know, it got lost or stolen. Those kinds of things are all things that you need to outline in your ultimate solution. And again, to Josh's point, that speaks to how your customers touch, feel, experience the product. And
Yeah,
then
I
again, oh, sorry, go ahead, Meredith.
no, it's okay. I was just thinking about that. You know, one of the things that's up here is the customer experience, right? And I know we'll have a lot of kind of loyalty brand marketing people who are part of this, and I think that's critical, right? What experience do you really want to create for the customers? These could be delivered via a text message, via an email, you know, it could be in person. So there's a lot of different levers available to really create that experience you want. And again, driving to those business outcomes that you're trying to get to, whether it's that retention play, acquisition, or ultimately it could be cost savings from a provider you're using now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that leads kind of to one of the big key takeaways here is that these configurations, these levers can't be necessarily set in stone either. You need to really consider, you know, the ability to, once you launch, and we'll have a slide on sort of launch and beyond, but ensuring that as you measure and learn from the scale of the program, being able to tweak these kinds of things. You could learn that, hey, we thought that a physical card made the most sense, but actually there's a really significant portion of our customer base that could benefit from a virtual only offering. And having the ability to add and adjust those things while not upsetting that often fragile relationship that you have with your customer.
Right. Yeah. Great.
And then again, last but certainly not least, is the regulatory framework. And once you define that component, ensuring that the right pieces are set up, and that's where again it's critical to work with somebody who brings that expertise with them, to set these things and test them and make sure that everything's working as it should before launch, so that when you get to launch, that if a fraud event takes place, and let's be honest, fraud is a fact of life in this world, that it's operationalized appropriately to respond to it in the right way.
Hey, Carter, I see the letters KYC/B on here. What do those mean?
Know your customer and or know your business, and that's regulatory terms for ensuring that your customers are who they say they are, and that's a fraud mitigation requirement. And again, that goes back to the components piece of it, in bringing the expertise to understand what are the right know your customer requirements or know your business requirements for that program. Things like, what personally identifiable information should you collect? Are you required to collect? And then what checks do you run against those individuals or those entities, to again verify them in an efficient way while mitigating your risk?